Fidel said that the kids of the rich were going to be sent to Russia. Well, Fidel didn't say that. An archbishop on the Voice of America said that. It was actually a CIA plot to see if they could. What they wanted to have happen was for this archbishop from Cuba, who was now in America, said that to everybody every night, your kids are going to be sent to Russia. So what they wanted to have happen was that Fidel would say, no, they can't leave. And then they could have a riot or whatever. But Fidel actually said, okay, they can leave. And which is something that the Cubans in Cuba feel very guilty about. And so like 15,000 kids were sent, supposedly to go to boarding schools.
To Russia or to America?
To America.
To America.
So they were sent to America, like 15,000. Nobody was ever going to send anybody to Russia. It was a lie.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough that my uncle was already here. So when we got here, my brother was 5 and I was 9. We went to live with him.
In
Hialeah, the worst place on earth, in a tiny little house. And he had never worked a day in his life.
what state?
Hialeah is right next to Miami.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Yeah.
It's the ghetto.
Yeah.
Still is. And we waited for like 7 months until my parents came. And then my father got out of Miami really fast. My father wanted to get away from Cubans and the whole political thing. He just didn't want to have anything to do with it, so he left.
What do you remember of Miami in those days?
Miami was like a hick town that you went to get to Havana, you know. That's what it was. And it was very small, and there were so many Cubans that were arriving. They didn't know what to do with us. The CIA was going all over the place because they thought we were all, you know, spies. And yeah, so.
And this would have been about 64?
61.
61.
61, yeah.
And then you went from...
After the Bay of Pigs, that's when we left. We stayed till the Bay of Pigs, and after that, we had to get out.
You stayed in...
And we were in Cuba when the Bay of Pigs happened. And then right after that is when everybody left. Yeah.
And your parents got out and they moved to Miami, and then you all...
And then the Catholic Relief, because there was no welfare if you were Cuban. So basically the Catholic Relief would give Cubans Spam, Velveeta cheese, lima beans, and that's what we lived on. And then my father went on. There were not a lot of jobs because there were so many immigrants, right?
Yeah.
So my father went to the Catholic Relief, and they said to him, you can pick... we will relocate you. We promise there's a church in these cities that will get you a job, get you a house, and will get you airplane tickets for you and your entire family to go there and leave Miami. So my father had a choice of Boston, New York, or LA. And he picked LA, he told us, because he was hoping to run into Elizabeth Taylor. So you have to understand my father was like 27 at the time. And so we went to LA, and sure enough, they were waiting for us, and sure enough, they had a house for us, and sure enough, they had a job for him. And we were the only Cubans there. And very happy time in my life.
And where were you in LA?
In LA, we were in not Sherman Oaks. We were in Canoga Park in the valley, on Sherman Way, behind a hamburger stand. This old ranch house from the 20s. Dilapidated. But we had a lot of fun.
And your father had a CPA job?
Yeah.
And this would be about 62?
63.
63.
Yeah. Actually, we got to LA the day Marilyn Monroe died. Because when we got off the plane, I looked at a paper, and that's what it said. So whatever day that was, I think it was August 6th, is when we got to LA. I'm not sure what year. Probably 63.
And what were your other early memories of LA?
I loved LA. LA was empty. LA was freedom. It was also racism, and but I loved it because I felt like we were free from our family and from being Cuban. and I loved it. At the same time, I missed Cuba. You know, my mother did not want to not go back to Cuba at the beginning. She was just waiting for it to be all over. And but I think we all loved it until some of our relatives started showing up and living there. Yeah, I felt free. And I learned English like in 2 years. And I always said that Patty Duke taught me how to speak English. And when I was like in the 6th grade, I thought if I want to figure out Americans, I have to figure out English people. So I started reading every book at my elementary school about English people. And then I hit Shakespeare one day. And I started reading it and I understood it. Even though I didn't understand what every word was, I understood what they were about. And I think I had read all Shakespeare by the time I was 13, you know, because I was so obsessed by English people. And that's what got me into being interested in theater. More just play. Yeah, I went to Van Nuys High School.
Oh.
Um,
Was there theater at Van Nuys High School
yes,
at all?
Yes, and they told me how talented I was, and then they were going to do David and Lisa, and I assumed I was going to play David, and then the acting teacher said, no, you have an accent. You can't. I did have an accent. You can't play David. And I said, well, I'll play the French guy then. He said, no, we've written you a very special part. And the part was that I was in a wheelchair and I couldn't talk. I had to go, stuff like that. So I watched A Miracle Worker, and I upstaged everybody. I was so angry. I thought, really? I win all the contests. This is what you. So it was my beginning of realizing I was Latino. And then I get this letter saying that I got the NEA grant for my play. And all my playwriting friends hated me. Told me it wasn't fair, that I was an idiot, and how could I get a playwriting grant. Irene told me it was really unfair, and that she wouldn't let me be part of the INTAR Playwrights Lab, but that I could come as her assistant, which would mean that I would have to serve all the real playwrights and like their coffee, and, you know. And I said, okay, I'll do that. That's fine with me. Great. So
and where was she running her lab?
At INTAR. She was running it on the place that they tore down on the top floor of 53rd. The Rockefeller Foundation, or the Ford Foundation, had given INTAR money to pay playwrights to study with Irene. So Irene felt that since I got this NEA grant that I didn't deserve, that I shouldn't get any more money for playwriting, but that I could be her assistant and learn. And I went, okay, I need to learn. I need to write plays now because you just told me that that's what I should do. So I made the worst decision of my life, which was to just be a playwright and stop acting, which was something I've regretted all my life. But that's what I did. And in those 6 months, I wrote Broken Eggs, The Modern Ladies of Guanabacoa, Saru and the Gypsies, and Fabiola.
Wow.
Because Irene and
Very productive 6 months.
Yeah, Irene and I lived across the street from Irene, and we went and
Which was where?
It was Umbero. What's it called? It's that square, like this, you know, in the village. I can't remember what it's called, but right there. And I lived across the street from her, and we went up there and wrote every day together. And it was magical. It was, she told me once, years from now you'll think of this and you'll think of it as the best time of your life. I knew she was right. And we became very close. It's around 1981, and then EST decided to produce my first play, and Irene couldn't handle it. And then we had a lot of fights and became not close. You know, but see, I'm from LA where theater doesn't mean much. So when my first play was produced at the Marathon at EST.
And what was the first one?
Rosario and the
Rosario.
Gypsies, which was a musical.
I remember Rosario. It was on
And
the same bill as the Mary Gallagher.
There it was.
I believe, yes.
And Frank Bridge gave me a good review. I had no idea what it meant.
Yeah.
And then I found out. And Irene hated the play because she thought it was about her and I was making fun of her. And that's sort of about you. It was sort of about Padua, but it's a play. It's also about me. Yeah, I mean, you know what a play is. And so then I was very unprepared for the next 10 years of my life, but it happened.
But then you started working quite a bit with Ensemble Studio Theater.
Yeah, they produce quite a bit of the Ensemble Studio Theater and James Hammerstein, who directed Modern Ladies, and who directed Broken Eggs, and who directed Fabiola, and who...
How did you come in contact with James?
Well, he was a member of EST, and when they were doing Modern Ladies, Kurt said to me, so you're going to meet all these directors, we'll talk about it and we'll pick one. So I met all these directors, and they were all telling me how talented it was and how poetic it was, and the play and stuff. And Jamie came in and said, you have a lot of work to do. And some of this poetry shit, what the fuck do you think you're doing? That's a guy I want to work with. And he taught me a lot about what's expected of you as a playwright in the 50s. He taught me a lot about what was expected of me, and I did it, and I learned a lot, and I loved him, and because he was Oscar Hammerstein's son, he then optioned anything I was going to write so that I didn't have to work, and his wife Dina and him were very, very kind to me, and very, God, I needed it so much because, I read South Pacific when I was in elementary school, and that kind of, from everybody at ESC, that kind of belief in me was, overwhelming. And I became an American. I think that's the moment I became an American. That kind of acceptance was just not anything that was happening to any Latino playwrights at that moment. And certainly not anything I ever expected. And also the way the audiences reacted to the plays that were about Cubans. At a place like EST. That weirdly enough, they also, the really interesting thing about Kurt is that he also did Jose Rivera's first play that same year, The House of Ramon Iglesias.
Yes.
And he never treated us like we were Latinos. And so we're just playwrights he really thought were good. And he never made a big deal about the fact that he was doing 2 Latino plays in the season at all, So that made you feel like you were there because of your writing. Oh, Repertorio did 2 of my plays, right around then, Espanol.
And tell us about that.
Well, I get a call from Renee Bush. I would very much like to do your plays, come down to the theater, and they were already... They said, are you going to translate it? I said, no, but I want to fix it after somebody translates it. And they said, okay. So they were doing Modern Ladies, and they were just different than any theater I'd ever been in. They were a rep company, and they rehearsed with a bottle of vodka on the middle of the stage. And they were all Cubans, so that was really exciting. And they didn't understand my play, and Modern Ladies. And finally Renee said to them one day, the problem is you're pretending it's 3 sisters and it's about Cubans. Cubans don't think, they just talk. And then they got the play. And, because Renee was right. God, it was just, Gilberto was such an incredible person to me all my life. They just believed in me in a way that was even in a way more than ESC, because I was kind of what they've been waiting for, you know, a Cuban person that wrote plays that lived in the United States, you know. So we had a long history together. Then they did Broken Eggs, and 10 years later they took Broken Eggs to Cuba, which was really exciting. And
Tell us about that.
Well, Gilberto was the first person to come out of the closet about Cuba. So he went to Cuba, and he had the New York Times with him. And
About what year?
it was before the flooding. Well, when we finally went to Cuba, it was 97, so I think, or 96. So I think it was around 1994. And he had the New York Times followed him. And it was a front page story in the New York Times, Sunday paper, but not the entertainment section, the front page of the New York Times, about him going back to Cuba, which cost him a great deal of trouble from the Cubans that lived there. I thought it was a very brave thing he did. So while he was in Cuba, he set up an exchange.
Now tell us who this is. This is...
Gilberto Saldivar ran Repertorio Español. He was the managing director. And he and Renee and Federico started the theater together. So, so they did an exchange with the Ensemble Theater in Havana, that they would come here and they would take a play there. So they came here and did 2 plays, I think like 95, 96. There were people, you know, rioting outside the theater and yelling and bomb threats, and people just said, fuck you, you know, this is what I'm doing. Because there were still enough people that, you know, were militant, that were Cubans alive to have this happen. And then Gilberto said, if you don't care, there's going to be a lot of problems, but we want to do your play in Cuba. And I said, sure. Then it became the subject of talk radio in Miami. And all the actors that were in the play got fired from the commercials they were in Miami. They called me every name in the book. My grandmother was going crazy. But we went. And I didn't go, the play went, and they toured it all over Cuba, Broken Eggs, and it changed things, you know. And 3 years later, I went there with my movie, you know. And I stopped being the kind of Cuban that doesn't want to deal with Cuba, you know. And it's, you know, it was, you know, I always consider Gilberto the person that allowed me to go back to Cuba, because it was all his contacts in Cuba and stuff that allowed me to go back at that point, because it wasn't that easy to go back.
And the tour, I'm sure it's going all around Cuba. Yeah. Was it accepted, wasn't it, there?
Oh, yeah. It was Miriam Colon, played the grandmother,
sure.
Ana Margarita, and the rest of them were Cubans, except for Sabrina, who was from Venezuela, Sabrina Guevara, who was in The Cook. And she played, people loved it. Yeah, yeah.
And Miriam had her own theater here.
Yeah, but Miriam really wanted. Miriam had also been in Broken Eggs at the Tabor.
Oh,
yeah. So Miriam knew the part. So she really wanted to do it, and she wanted to go to Cuba. And she was working there once in a while.
And where they hated you with hate radio was
Miami. Yeah.
And many of the actors were coming from Miami.
No, they were all here, but they're kind of, the actors that used to work at Repertorio were well-known Cuban actors, so they'd go to Miami and do commercials. Like Ana Margarita was one of the biggest stars of Cuba before Fidel. And she was also a big singer and stuff, and she said to them, I'm going to go see my brothers, and I don't care what you think. And there was a big article. Oh, by the way, it was covered by the New York Times every day. There was an art in the international section, and there was a big article in the New York Times about her seeing her brothers again. That was very moving.
They just didn't want you going back there.
Well, also they didn't want them to take a play where the Cubans are corrupt and gay. That's the other reason they didn't want it. They were calling it rotten eggs, and that I was lying about everything. You know, they didn't like being seen that way in Cuba. You know.
You did not go back with the Broken Eggs tour, did you?
No, they didn't let me in.
They wouldn't let you go back. When did
It took a film to let me. 3 years later, when I had a film at the Latin American International Film Festival, they finally let me back in.
And that was what?
1999.
1999.
Yeah.
And tell us about that.
Well, they sent me my visa at the last possible moment. I thought they were going to let me in again. But by then I knew a lot of people in Cuba because they've been coming here. I mean, you realize it's an industry in Latin America that you never knew existed. And 700 people showed up to my screening. They were guards because they wanted to see what I had done. They got the movie, where a lot of places people didn't get the movie.
And this is a movie you directed?
I directed and wrote.
What's the movie?
It's called Exiles in New York. And it's not about Cubans. There's only one Cuban character.
Was this Betty Ann?
That's Betty Ann.
Producing
it, yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's why I never ended up on the
film
channel, because Betty Ann didn't want to sell it. You know, too many people that I know. Yeah. So Betty Ann came to Cuba too.
Yes. And who was in the film?
Joseph de Guzman.
Yeah.
Ed Basalo, Tatiana Yasakovitz, Joe Quintero, Philip Courtney, Jim Simpson, John Rothman, a lot of people. Kind of a crazy movie. We made it for a dime. But we got it to a lot of festivals. Unfortunately, we didn't sell it because Betty Ann didn't want to sell it to the Independent Film Channel, and then we lost the opportunity.
To sell
it. Yeah. I got a letter about 2 years ago from the Academy, and they said, "We have your movie. We're saving it. We went for the vault at Duar." And I went, "Oh, nice." And then when I was in LA, I went to see them, and they showed me the movie, and I said, "It's so nice of you that you saved every movie in the vault at Duar." And they said, "Are you out of your mind? We saved 500 of them." And I said, "Why did you save mine?" They said, "Well, because of you and because the guy that used to run the New York Film Festival told us to." And well, that's lovely. So it's safe now in the vault of the Academy. I saw the corpse and everything. So that's great. The negative is there. I watched it recently. It was interesting. It was very much about immigration. And it's interesting that I kind of knew what was about to happen.
Was it based on immigration and your experience of immigration?
It's about a busboy. It's about an English busboy and a busboy for Central America and what happens to both of them in New York. I've always been interested in busboys and what is really their life and how angry are they. So that's sort of what the movie's about, and I'm also interested in people that come here from England to escape England because they can't handle. So that's what the movie's about.
And what was the interest in busboys is fascinating. It's just
I always have to because I always think they're invisible, and they're not invisible. They're there. What does it mean? Why do people pretend like they're not there?
I wonder the same things about the people who deliver food to your door.
I know them too. They're like doing a shitty job, so you don't have to go out in the snow. So I was just fascinated. I've always been fascinated by restaurants, and a lot of my friends were waiters when I came to New York. So I've always thought, how does this really? It's like putting on a show at a restaurant. So how does this really happen? So yeah.
How about Don Juan in New York City?
Don Juan in New York City. Okay, so at the same time I'm doing a Burning Beach at the American Place, I'm doing Don Juan in New York City at the Theater for New City. And Don Juan in New York City was basically the Don Juan myth, but in New York in 1986. And Don Juan was being accused of giving people AIDS. And he was bisexual, and it had songs, and it had film. Because what I was really interested in was what would an audience put up with if it's on film, and what would it put up with if it's on stage. So there would be films that he was making, like Two Guys in Bed, that you would see as a film, and then you would hear the mattress going, and you would see the same sex scene on stage. And so the main characters were Don Juan, his male lover, his female lover, who was a singer, and his best friend, who was a Carol Channing impersonator. And Carol Channing was dying of it. And at the end of the first act, she dies. And then the second act, the first act is doing a film retrospective, and the second act is the tribute for Carol Channing. And at the tribute for Carol Channing, there's a fake Carol Channing. This doesn't really understand. You know, I was also really obsessed with Charles Nodlam. And I think I was writing about him. And the other people that I saw following him that didn't really have that great theatrical urgency or knife, you know, that it was all being watered down. So that's what I was trying to write about. And all my friends were dying of AIDS. Crystal and George were, of course, in heaven. They thought it was just wonderful. And they said to me one day, the NEA is coming to see you. And I said, I don't know, Crystal. Anyway, so I get a rave review for A Burning Beach from Mel Casa. I mean, rave review, you know. Then he comes to see the one in New York. And then there's no review. And so I call him. And I go, Mel, so are you ever going to review the one in New York? And he says to me, no, I'm going to save you from yourself. And I go, what? He goes, I'm going to save you for yourself. You must have lost your fucking mind. That is the dirtiest play I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not going to review it. And I said, no, maybe you're saving yourself since you gave me a rave review 3 weeks ago. I said, okay, wonderful that you are not going to do it. You know, I had been out to dinner with him and stuff. It wasn't like someone I didn't know. And so then it started having people come who were sex addicts. And they would have meetings after the show, which I thought was fantastic. Then 3 months later, Renee Bush calls me up. And he goes, tell Crystal she's very lucky that I was on the NEA panel. And I go, Renee, what happened? He goes, well, they went to see the one in New York, and the woman wrote that it was pornography and that it wasn't theater, and that this theater should never be given any money ever again. And he said, so I raised my hand and I said, I saw it. And they went, what? He said, I saw it. This woman's wrong. It was a modern Don Juan. That is what Don Juan is about. And that's what he was doing. So, yeah, so that play, you know, I've written all these Cuban plays, and then I write plays like CB Wants to Play the Blues and stuff that are the part of me that's part of Padua, you know, where I just want to experiment. And people don't understand, so I most of the time do them at Theater for New City, because that's not, you know, the box I'm in, you know. And, you know, I haven't had a big production since The Cook in 2007 at the Goodman at Seattle Rep, but I've done a play every year at Theater for the New City, and I've done things that I think are risky. And I've sat there going, why the fuck am I doing this when I could be writing television? But I have to do it, you know. I write a play every year, whether people want it or not. And I've been through people not wanting me. And, you know, then maybe they want you again, but that can't stop you. You know, I'm in the period of no one wanting me, and I've been in it for like, except that my plays are getting done in Latin America all the time. Except that, you know, but it's certainly in the period of regional theater not wanting me, and, you know, that happens. Same thing with Joanna Colitis, you know, I was an artistic associate at the Public, which was, that means a lot.
Tell us about that period.
Oh.
That was after Joe.
That was after Joe, before George. She decided to have, you know, 18 artistic associates, and I was one of them, and we would have meetings. We could rehearse at the Public. We could borrow props, we were putting on a play, we would talk. I thought there was the opportunity for something really creative that was going to happen between all of us. Sometimes we read plays together. You could come up with ideas. It was pretty great. She was sort of letting a lot of people be involved in the way she ran the theater, which unfortunately perhaps was what people didn't trust. You know, the thing is that everybody I knew from the theater was from the street. I was from the street because I didn't go to college. I went to acting school. Sam was from the street. Irene was from the street. Joanne. You know, none of us, we thought we had the right to complain. We thought we had the right to push for, and then at some point it became that you didn't. And it was hard to adjust to, you know. And so it's why I'm doing television. Because I can't pound my head against the wall anymore. You know, and in television I'm new, and they want me. You know, and I'm lucky that they want me because I get to keep writing. My favorite story about Crystal and George is that when I was doing What to Refuse, one day I went on stage, you know, after getting panned to smithereens, everything about me, my body, my playwriting, everything. But a lot of people were coming. And it was basically a play. My great uncle was arrested in Cuba, and he was one of the people that refused to put on the uniform. So he was naked in jail for 10 years. And
he refused to put on their prison uniform.
No, their army uniform.
Their army uniform, I think.
And I wrote it for Oleg Krupa, but then he didn't want to be in it because you have to be naked for half an hour. I don't know why he didn't want to. And then we started going down actors, and then I thought, well, everybody's worse than me. I'm going to do it. I'm better than everybody else that we could get to do it. And so, you know, but I didn't set the play in Cuba because at that time I was obsessed with Life is a Dream, like all Latino writers. And so I set it in a world. Is this world really going on? And I made him a newscaster in this world. So one day I was performing it and I was naked and there was an audience of two sides. And I'm naked performing the play and I hear these people going, this is really about Cuba. And that's not what, they were talking for the entire fucking performance about how this was not how Cuba really was. So when I was taking my bow and I was in a row, I went up to them and said, and fuck you too. And then Crystal comes in first and she goes, did you just tell the audience to fuck themselves? I said, I told them you must have said something in Spanish. I said, no, I told them to fuck themselves. Here I am naked and that all they can do is talk, they're going to get it from me. And she started laughing and George came in and said, well done. And I thought, this is the place for me. And always, every year Crystal goes, do you have a play for me? Mm. And it's the most trust I've ever had. I understand that like Wynn in American Plays Theater, they don't play the game the way you're supposed to play it, right? But I still think it's a place where young people get to do their stuff, you know, and I hope people help Crystal as she is in her 70s and keeps letting young people do their stuff and certainly letting me do whatever I want. And never, it's the kind of belief that no one has ever given me but them. And I sort of wanted to say that to both George and then for the last 20 years, Crystal have given me whatever I want. You know, I have to sweep and I have to figure out a way to make it work and I have to raise money and all that, but it's what I want. They produce a lot of people, you know, and I think it's easy to write them off and that they shouldn't be written off. Just because you're not part of the system doesn't mean that you're not encouraging the cultural life of this city, you know, because the cultural life of the city includes many, 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 many people, you know, and so I think that's why it's important. I think they've been a major force, like Ellen was, in encouraging the other side of the city, you know, and a big part of the off Broadway movement. And I think it's easy to dismiss people like them because it's a certain game, as you know, that you have to play to keep it going that I played when I ran INTAR. You know, the game in a way gets in the way of the